Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us again for the next talk in our little conference series, where we're replacing our Norm conference and the Tees Valley Wildlife Recorders Conference that should have happened in the spring, with a series of talks over the autumn. Over November, actually. So we're delighted to have Dr. Sue Antrobus from the Tees Valley Wildlife Trust joining us today to get into oak trees, and with the title of a year in the life of the oak tree. And Sue will be present while this talk is being sort of having its initial broadcast. And if you've got any questions, then just pop them into the comments section below, and Sue will be able to answer them that way. So please do get interactive. We like when people join in and ask questions or make comments. We do love to hear from you. So Sue, thanks so much for joining us and doing this talk. I'm really looking forward to it. And I just wondered if you could just introduce yourself a wee bit, just tell us a little bit about yourself. And then when you're ready, just start sharing your screen. I'll probably mute myself and cut off my video, but be assured I'll be here listening to you. So I'll hand over to you, Sue, and thanks again.
Hello everyone. My name is Sue Antrobus. I work for the Tees Valley Wildlife Trust. Been there for a number of years now, and most of the work that I do is about engaging people with wildlife. I'm not an expert on oaks. I'm talking today about oak trees just because it is one of my passions today, and I feel really sad that we can't have our conference this year because it's always been really enjoyable. So I think this is a smashing idea of Fiona's, that we can have this series of talks. And I'm going to start by sharing my screen because you'll be pleased to know I've got some pictures. Let's see, there we go, it's that one. And if I do share, there we go. So
there might just be a wee delay for that to come through, but it looks like, yep, that's it now. That's great, yeah. Sue. Yep. Okay, I'll mute myself and I'll let you carry on.
Okay, right. So today I'm going to be sharing with you an adventure that I started in 2017. And the reason why I want to share this with you today is that it's Eric's 10th birthday. And this was a little recording project that I did really close to my own home. I didn't need to travel very far. I didn't need any special equipment. And it sort of demonstrates that you don't have to go to far-flung places to observe and record wildlife. And particularly now we're in COVID and that we're being encouraged to exercise and visit natural places near to our homes. So I thought this would be a good subject. So why oak trees? Well, the reason why I thought I'd follow oak trees for a year in 2017 is I really wanted to get to, I've always loved oak trees, and I really wanted to find out more about them. And so I chose some oak trees in Gisborough in East Cleveland, where I live, and I wanted to look at the personality, the biology, the ecology, the legend. But the main reason why I chose this little project to do is that although I work for the Wildlife Trust, I was finding myself losing my own connection with nature because I was spending so much time in the office, writing reports, doing grant applications, attending meetings, that I thought, right, I really need to do something for myself to reconnect as a naturalist. And in different years, I've picked things like, let's learn about ladybirds, or let's identify bumblebees. But to be honest, I'm not a taxonomist. I tend to dabble. And my interest is mainly in the ecology and relationships between things. So instead of focusing on a taxonomic group or a species, I'd actually focus on 3 trees. And the reason for the oak tree is, well, who doesn't love oak trees? And you've got here the symbol of the National Trust. and we think of oaks, I think a lot of people think oaks as really a British tree. And I can remember when I was very little collecting acorns, and some of you might recognise, some of our mature listeners might recognise the Enchanted Wood by Enid Blyton. Now this tree was famous because it had different fruits and nuts, but I always envisaged it as an oak tree. So it's just part of our heritage. And on the left here, you can see this tapestry going back to oaks being very, very, very royal. So I've always found oaks magical, and I don't know what it is about them, really. There's just something special. So before I started, like anyone who needs to have an excuse to have books, I thought, oh, I need to buy loads of new books. But these, at the beginning of 2017, I realised I already had these books on oak trees. I have to say I bought a lot more. So I started off by delving. And then I really started, before we get down to my free oaks, I started to really think about oak trees, because we consider them as, you know, pedunculate oak, it's the English oak, and yet it's very widely distributed. I mean, this shows the map of our oak, our pedunculate oak in Europe, and you can see how wide it is. And when you look at oaks generally, the quercus, there is hundreds and hundreds of species, and we only have two. We have our English oak and the Sessile Oak, but when you look at Northern America, they have so many oaks. So really, it's quite strange, really, that we think of our oak as English. And I think whoever has oak trees, they always consider it part of their heritage, because it's been so important for timber, all sorts of uses, acorns. So down from the general distribution right down to locally. So these are my free oak trees. First of all, we have the Alderman Oak, so called because it's on a road called Alderman Road in my housing estate. And it's what I consider as a grandfather of an oak. It's a really old tree. Then I've got my Gisborough Hall Oak. Now, those of you who look at this and thinking I've missed the U out of Gisborough, I haven't, because this is the old spelling of Gisborough Hall. And this is a Parkland Beauty oak. And my final oak is the Rosebury Oak. And this is oak that's in a woodland. And I've called it a Skinny Socialite because it's in a woodland. It's very, very slim. So I'm going to introduce you to my free trees. This one, this is the very first one, and this is my oak tree on Alderman Road, and I'd driven past this so many times and never stopped. So I got out the car that January and had a really, really good look around this tree. And as you can see, it is a fascinating tree. On the left, you can see how the tree is divided into two, and then it's actually joined up again. It's got loads of holes and nooks and crannies. It's not a particularly large tree. It hasn't got a big crown, but it's full of, you see here, spiders, webs, rot and fungus. You know, it really is full of wildlife, and all these holes and crevices will be providing microhabitats for many species, bacteria, fungi, mosses, lichens, as well as specialist invertebrates. Now, quite shocking to say, until a few years ago, tree surgeons in the past would actually fill rot holes and cavities with cement, just as if they were tree dentists. But now there's been a huge amount of research on the importance of habitats and that dying trees have. So it's really important. And this, I'm introducing, this is my Gisborough Parkland Oak, and you can see what a magnificent specimen. And in winter, it really gives you a good chance to look at the architecture of the tree. Very, very large tree, very widespread. Now, one thing that's quite interesting with these Parkland trees, they are actually really wide, and that's just because they don't have the competition. Another thing I thought, if you look at the shape of this tree, It's got a really good oak tree shape in that the branches are very wide. And an interesting thing about this is that oak trees don't do very well with snow. And this is why they don't grow really far north into the snowy areas. And that's because the branches are quite horizontal. When there is a lot of snow, that's a lot of weight. So they're just not the right shape for our northern climates, but perfect for us. This is the tree again. You can see it's right on the Cleveland, very close to Cleveland Street trail. And this tree is in its prime. Its bark's quite smooth. There's a few burrs. It doesn't have many hollows. Here's a close-up of the bark, and you see all the different lichens growing. And final tree. Now, this is an area that some of you, even those who don't live in the Tees Valley, may know, because I think most people know Rosebury Topping, and this is the wood underneath Rosebury Topping. And lots of people don't go through the woods. They get seduced by climbing up the hill when underneath is this amazing, amazing woodland. And it was really hard to pick a tree here because they're all quite similar, similar age, and these are Sessile Oaks, really interesting woodland. So I'd picked my 3 trees, I got them on a map, and the reason what I want to introduce here is at the bottom of the slide. It says that this map is from the National Library of Scotland website, and if you're doing anything to do with landscaping and wildlife and looking into history, this is a really good website to look at, because what it does, it has loads and loads of digitized old maps on there, not just for Scotland but the whole of the British Isles, and you can actually home in on your area and compare photographs of today, aerial photographs, with maps of the past, and it really is a useful site. So you can see my 3 oaks are in walking distance from my house, which is what I wanted, because I wanted to visit them every week. So going back to the old maps, this is my Gisborough Park Oak, and not a lot's changed. It's on the edge of Parkland, and what is really interesting is that this is an ancient park, part of the Gisborough estate, but when you're out in the field, you can see this ridge fir, or ridge furrow as some people call it, which was from medieval ploughing. So it's probably been parkland for a long time. And contrast this to my alderman oak, and my oak is just there on the corner, and there's this housing estate, and I live over here. None of that was here 100 years ago, but what you have got is this railway line. We're into a mineral railway because we're into the ironstone, and the tree 100 years ago would have been sitting right next to the railway. And that little spinney is there. So the environment around that oak tree has changed an awful lot in the past 100 years. And it's really good that it's been saved. And I'm pleased to say there's a few oak trees further along down the road that are on the road verge that have also been saved. And finally, the Rosebury oaks, and you can see ancient woodland here. And what we mean by ancient woodland is that it's been woodland since at least 1600. So the trees in the woodland are not particularly old, but the area has been continuously wooded for a long time. So I think you can see that I've chosen very different habitats and different trees. So I've got 3 trees growing in different habitats but of different ages. So that's how I started. Now, the hard thing was waiting for spring. So each week I'd go and look at the trees in great detail. And you can see in March, nothing much happening. This is my alderman oak. And then by the 4th of April, you've got bud burst. And in actual fact, in March, when you go back, the leaves are all still there, but the cells haven't expanded. They were actually manufactured. The tree manufactured them the year before, and they are just really waiting for spring. And really, these oaks I felt were a bit like sleepy teenagers. By the 25th of March, my oaks were still sleeping. The buds look dormant but not lifeless. And really the sycamore was out, the horse chestnut, even the rowan in my garden, but the oak still wasn't doing anything. And it is one of the later trees, not as late as ash. So it was quite exciting each week watching the leaves come out. And then, oh, let's go. I've gone back too forward. There we go. And this was my Gisborough Park Oak on the 9th of April. And I've got the north and the south side. You see the difference. And the good thing I found about watching the trees come out is it made me look at all trees when I was driving. I'd be watching which comes out first. And there's huge variety of leaf burst. And I found in Middlesbrough, I was noticing the trees coming out earlier there, and I wondered whether that was because it's slightly warmer. As time goes on, this is my Gisborough Park Oak. Now, luckily, I drive past this tree every day to my job at the Wildlife Trust. Well, not at the weekends. And I could see each day you get that slightly, when the leaves come out, they're like a yellowy green, and you get a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. And it started me thinking, what determines bud bursts? How do trees know when to come into leaf? And this is the study of phenology, the study of seasonal changes, and it really is a fascinating subject. And it is something that the Woodland Trust do Nature's Calendar, of which you can really look at and record when trees come into bud. So looking at this, obviously our oaks are deciduous, but not all oaks are deciduous. There's evergreen oaks in North America. And this thing about deciduous, it is a way to survive the winter. It's not so much the cold, but it is surviving water loss. And it isn't just temperature that triggers the trees to come into leaf, because obviously if you have a warm spell in the middle of winter, your oaks would come into leaf. It's more, the trigger is you have to have a cold snap, and then the prolonged colds before dormancy is broken by warming. So I also started thinking, well, how do they detect the changes in temperature? And really, it's going right back to hormones, to the hormones. Now, we are obviously familiar with us having hormones. It seems quite odd to think that plants also have hormones. And remembering vaguely back to my time at university, I was sort of thinking, I remember it was gibberellins, cytokinins, abscisic acid, and these are all the important control processes that trigger. But there's still quite a lot that's not known about it, which is interesting. Do they all come out at the same time? If you go around and notice in the spring, you'll find there's quite a variation, even with one species of bud burst. Is this random? Is it genetic? There's all sorts of factors involved. And obviously, you see, if it's a sheltered place, the leaves come out earlier, but I've seen trees in the same field and certain ones come out much earlier. And people have suggested that this is an adaptation to avoid predation of this variation in bud burst. I don't know if I agree with that, but it's an idea. Now, I don't know if anyone remembers this. Oak before the ash, we're in for a splash. Ash before the oak, we're in for a soak. And because I've always felt that oak does come out before the ash. And so I always wondered why this rhyme was there. So I thought, oh, I'll do a little bit of research about this. So I went to look at the Nature's Calendar, which is coordinated by the Woodland Trust. And using the data from that, they've found out in the last 50 years, there's only been a handful of times really when ash has come out before the oak, but going further back, if you look into the 18th century, ash came out earlier than oak, much more frequently. So there's been a change there, and the reason for that is that warmer springs. We've now got warmer springs. So oak comes into leaf before the ash as a result of the warmer spring temperature. So for every 1 degree rise in temperature, oak gains a 4-day advantage over ash. So that is something interesting, how trees, different species of trees, respond differently to temperature. They're all different. This is my friend Heather, and we always like to go out botanising together. Heather Kelly's doing one of the talks coming up with Eric, and this is us looking at lichens, because I then started to get really interested in lichens to see what was growing on my oak trees. Found it much harder than I thought, the identification of lichens. I do know a few. I know more than I did before, but still find it difficult. And this is us now. It's spring, and we're in. This is if you're going to go to the Woodlands at Rosebury Oak in spring, they are the most absolutely fantastic sight of bluebells. So this is the only one of my oaks to have a really lovely woodland flora under, really ancient flora, and my memory of this wood each spring is just lying on the ground with the scent of bluebells. It really is magnificent. And as you can see, the oak isn't in leaf yet. And this is why the woodland flora does so well, because it needs to get all its growing in before the trees come into leaf. So it's a race against time to get all its photosynthesis and flowering done before the dense canopy of the oak. Now, I started to get a bit sidetracked, so I was really enjoying looking at my trees, but then I thought, oh, I wonder what other important oak trees I've got in the area. So this is something we can use, and this is something that's great fun. It's another thing by the Woodland Trust. It's the Ancient Tree Inventory, and you can just go on this. I've just picked 2 pages for you, and you can see what trees are on there. And I found this tree on a bridle path, and I thought I would go and see if I could find it. And there it is, and you can see this is a magnificent tree. It's under the Cleveland Way in the Cleveland Hills, and you can see to the left I've got my stick, so you can see how big the tree is, and you can stand right inside this tree. It's now the whole of the inside of the tree is decayed, but it's still living. You can see here all the leaves. It's full of life inside. It's wonderful, and it is an incredible habitat, these really ancient trees. This is a really, really special tree, and this is just to say that if you can actually record trees and add them to the database. None of the trees I'm following are ancient or veteran trees, but you can see there's some on that database there that you can go and look at. And if you find some, you can add your observations. So it's really good. And then I started to look at the map more, and I found that just south of me to Helmsley seemed to be lots and lots of dots on that map for ancient trees, and it is an old deer park that's associated with the castle. So I thought I really had to visit. So this is me and my daughter visiting in spring. She came to look at the lambs and a promise of going to a cafe while I delved around looking at oak trees. Absolutely incredible. So parklands are really important for these ancient trees. And the reason they're so special is there's some species of insects and other invertebrates that will only live in the rotten wood of these old trees. And this oak tree on the right here, you can see there's a holly tree growing out of it. and you get them full of birds. Now oaks, foresters would not consider these oaks very good for timber, but they're very, very good for wildlife. And the older they get, the more character they have, the more interesting, a bit like people really. And here they've left the dead wood next to the tree, which is really important because standing dead wood is important. Dead wood on the ground is important, and it's important to not to chop it up, but to leave it in large pieces and to be colonized naturally. But then after a while, after we spent a few hours there, we retired back to a cafe in Helmsley. Oh, I have to point out here that Megan is drinking, not the wine from the bottle behind it, but it is Ribena, just in case anyone is thinking that my daughter's having wine in the middle of the day. So back to my own trees, and this is summer now. You can see here, this is my beautiful Parkland Oak, and how dense that canopy is. Really dense canopy, surrounded by buttercups and sheep. Really is such a contrast from the winter. And what I really wanted to do was, I wish I could still climb trees. It'd be great to get up there in the canopy and have a look what's going on, because all I can see is what's on the ground. I really want to be up there. Anyway, so I was bringing bits home of tree to look at. I wanted to look at the catkins. These are this is the male flowers of the oak. But while I was doing this, I thought, oh, what is this? And what this looks like, it looks like a blister on the leaves. And I thought, I think that is a plant gall, because I'm aware of galls, but I hadn't really done anything about it. So a gall, I thought this looked like a currant gall when I looked through my books, but apparently currant galls meant to grow on the leaves, so I wasn't too sure. And this is where the good old Facebook was really useful. Because I posted a picture on the insects of Britain and Northern Europe. Within a few minutes, a helpful chap came back and said it indeed was the sexual generation, and this is the name of the wasp, which I'm not going to embarrass myself by trying to pronounce its Latin name, and that the female can lay its eggs on the leaves, not just on the catkins. So I thought, this is interesting. So galls, if you're not familiar with them, they're really the growth of the plant, and it can be caused, they're triggered by often insects such as wasps, but also fungi, bacteria and mites. So I thought that I really needed this really expensive book on plant galls by Margaret Redfern, and I particularly liked that it had an oak on the cover. So I started to think, right, I'm going to start to have a look at some of the galls on my oak trees. And I found absolutely loads. So it started off, these are the Parkland Oaks, and I'm going to go into some of what I found on them. But once I started looking here, I did find my own oak trees had lots of these galls. And the most famous probably is the oak apple. And I found this at Rosebury Topping. The Newton under Rosebury, not on my oak tree, but on one nearby, and you can see how red it is and why it does look like an apple. And so I took it home and dissected it, and this picture at the bottom is from this chap off the internet, and this is the wasp. So it's absolutely fascinating, and what I couldn't believe is that I'd never noticed these before. So that was one of the advantages for me at looking closely. So this gall is produced by a parasitic wasp. Oh, I thought I'd put the Latin name up there, but I haven't. And what it does, in early spring, the female injects using an ovipositor, which is just an egg-laying device, up to about 30 eggs in the vein of a leaf, and this triggers the oak leaf to produce the gall, which is plant tissue, and that provides food and shelter for the larvae, which I found interesting. But the next bit I found out really fascinated me, because it's a really complex, interesting story that I could never have imagined. So by summer, these little waspy things nibble their way out the chambers and emerged. Now, only the males have wings, and the females don't. So as soon as the males get out, they mate with the females, and she lays her eggs, but not on the oak leaf. What she does is she climbs underground down the trunk onto the rootlets of the oak to produce an underground gall, which is different. And the larvae will feed underground for about 18 months, which is, you know, an incredible long time. And all the adults that emerge are female. There's no males. And then they emerge, the female and wingless, and these poor wingless females crawl all the way up and start the cycle again to lay their eggs. Now, I've no idea what the other gall on the root looks like, but I'm not going to go about digging up oak trees roots. So for me, I started to learn an awful lot about oak galls to such an extent. I even joined a few gall societies, but found out that they were quite specialist, and I didn't. It was a bit too complex for me, so I'm just going to dip my toe in the water with this one. Much more famous is the Oak Marblegall. Now, none of my trees had this, but this is on a little tiny oak tree that's growing in a ditch next to my Gisborough Park oaks. And wherever I find it, I seem to find it on small trees, not the big trees. So this is the Oak Marble, and many of you will know it because it is where we get ink from. The first ink that we used to use was written using the Oak Marble galls, and it's particularly rich in the tannin, and that, so it's very valued for dyeing as well. And I always thought that we always used this, but apparently it was imported. Oak marble galls were mainly imported from Eastern Europe, and we brought these into the country and gave them to our oak trees. And so it's caused by a little wasp as well, but not that, I don't find them that common, but they all seem to be on small oak trees. Right. Oh, there we go. Oh, there we go. My favourite gall, which I found in oak trees, I like to stick to the English names, they're descriptive. And this is the cotton wool gall. And obviously, this really protects the little insects from being eaten. And this occurs right up in the branches. I had to really, I had to get out on a ladder to actually get a good photograph of this one. Got a few funny looks. The artichoke gall does look like an artichoke. So these are all things that I think that you can, if you go out and look at, that you will find this year, because they're really common. Oh, these are, oh, I've gone back. These are my favourite. And these are called spangle galls. And you can see I've got two galls here. They're both types of spangle galls. And I thought, this is really odd. They don't look like, these circles don't look like spangles to me. I think of spangles as sweets that you got in the 1970s, and they were square. But when I read in Margaret's Redburn's Gall book, what she said is that they're called spangle because spangle is an old word that means a piece of glittery material, typically sewn as one of many on clothing for decoration. So really, if you think about it, when people call these spangle galls, they thought they looked like the little sparkly decorations that people wore on their clothes, which I think stretching it a little bit. And then these are the ones, I've got the silk button galls, and I think most people will be familiar with seeing these. But when you look at them under a hand lens, they're really fascinating. And all of my free oaks had these. And then we're getting into acorn time, and this is a knopper. This is the knopper gall, and you can see it's like a deformed acorn. There you go. Now, what's so interesting I found about these, they're very sticky, is very, very sticky as well, is that I hadn't really noticed them before, but they've only really increased since the 1960s. And that is because one generation occurs on the English oak or the Sessile Oak, and the other generation occurs on, oh, let's go back. There we go, on Turkey oak. So Turkey oak is a species that you may see in parks, or you can see it naturalized. And the Marblegall only really arrived in this country in the 1960s, and there was great, because it needs both the trees to do well, and there was great alarm to say, would it affect our crop of acorns? But we still seem to be doing well on acorns, which brings me on to talking about acorns. These are just such a lovely time of year now, with the acorns in the acorn cups going brown. And this made me think about lots of questions like, what actually are acorns? Where does the word acorn come from? How many acorns does a tree produce, and is it related to age? How and why do the numbers vary between trees? What factors are involved? What does eat acorns? And does this predation affect regeneration? And did we eat acorns, or was it just food for pigs? Now, can't go into all of them things in this presentation, but it's all questions to think about. And look at this floor being absolutely covered with acorns. And one of the things I think we all notice is that sometimes you have good acorn years and bad acorn years, and this quite a number of trees do this. Beech does it as well, and it's called mast years. So when you get really good, every so often, several years, you can get a really bumper crop of acorns, like here, and some years you hardly get any. And the trees in an area all seem to do the same thing. And the reasoning that scientists think that there's an evolutionary adaptation behind this, in thinking that a lot of things do like to eat acorns and the crop would be diminished. So if they all produce a lot of acorns at once, there's no way that all of them can be eaten by predators. So some survive. And I can't help but collect a few acorns here. And I was thinking, oh, acorn coffee, because in the past people had acorn coffee. So I looked at how to make it. I thought, oh, that looks really complicated. So I actually bought some, and I bought some from Poland, bought some acorn coffee, and I thought it'd be really fun to serve acorn coffee at some of the Wildlife Trust events that we're having outside. Now, I have to tell you that acorn coffee is absolutely disgusting. If you don't believe me, you can import some from Poland and try it yourself. It is absolutely hideous. So I don't know why people would drink it, but they did in the past. So I started to look more into acorns and why people ate it, because it is very rich in tannin. Which is really bitter and not very good for you. So then I started researching all about Native Americans and how they used acorns, and I was absolutely flabbergasted, because acorns were really, really important to some of the tribes. Several different types of acorn, of oak. Some have different levels of tannins, and what they would do is they would spend a lot of time harvesting the acorns, then drying the acorns, and making sure they didn't rot, and then they'd have to leach all the tannins out, and then they would dry them, and then they would make a flour, which they then use into soups, into breads, into gall, into like a gruel, into biscuits. And it was a really, really vital food source, because it was high in protein, carbohydrates and fats. So really important food source. I just had no idea about that. So coming on to autumn, beautiful, beautiful time of year. And I was noticing, one thing I noticed is that the different colours in the leaves, but that different oak trees and different species would go brown, change colour at different times. This isn't I'm just trying to think which tree that is. I can't remember which tree that is. And I usually can tell from a picture which oak tree this is or where that is. Aha, this is Gisborough, I think. And that isn't my oak tree, but it's a different one. And I think I've taken this just to show just the wonderful colour of oak. Is lovely, but let's go back again. But what I noticed with my trees, look, this is my Parkland oak, but these other trees in the background, these are all oak trees, the same species, growing in the same place, and this picture was taken on the 4th of December. So some oaks do seem to hang on to their leaves, and I don't know why. Why has this tree kept hold of its leaves and this tree hasn't? Another thing I noticed was that if you look at this is over at Captain Cook's monument on a little walk, and there's a tiny oak tree here and it's got all its leaves, and I think I'd noticed that there was a tendency for young oaks to keep their leaves, and I thought there must be a good reason for that. And from what I've read, people have postulated that the reason why young oak and young beech, which are closely related trees anyway, keep their leaves when small, it is to protect the delicate tree buds from browsers. So it may be an adaptation to that. And this was taken in a January or February. It kept its old leaves. So, and now the other thing about acorns is that here, this is one, and they do germinate straight away. They don't really have a dormancy. Our acorns only take, for our oaks, only take a few months to grow before they mature, but some of the American oaks, some of the species there, it takes 2 years. And they do germinate straight away. This is a lovely, this little picture here is, I was having a little picnic and found this little oak tree. But one thing that people have been talking about recently is just how little oak seems to be regenerating under oak trees and in woodlands. Most of the oak regeneration at the moment seems to be taking place out in the open, and it's been said that oak doesn't regenerate under its own shade, but this could be a recent thing. It did regenerate in the past, and it meant to be something about to do with a specific fungus. So really, I've come to the end of my oak year. It didn't stop there because I haven't stopped looking at oaks, and I would suggest if anyone wants to pick a few trees to look at next year as a project to do, it could be willow, alder, any trees. It really is very worthwhile because it gives you a good excuse to get out. It gives you you can always combine it with coffee and tea. You can see here that it gave me a good excuse to buy this new book, The Glorious Life of the Oak. And it's something that I particularly really enjoyed and would recommend.
I'll just say thanks, Sue, for that talk. It was fascinating, and I think it illustrates, you know, I suppose a lot of us who are interested in nature, it just illustrates the sort of endless interest of it. You know, when you actually stop and just look at things, it's just endlessly interesting, nature, and an amazing resource. Did it fulfill your sort of objective to sort of get back in touch, feel a bit back in touch with nature again?
Well, I have to make admission is that I started writing a blog, and the whole idea was to do a monthly blog, and I did do that until August, and then I stopped. I think I stopped around October. I sort of lost momentum, and I think what it was, I was doing a detailed blog, and that took up so much time and more time at the computer. So that element I didn't, but yes, it really did. It really did focus my mind really, and made me set aside some time to do the work.
Yeah. And that's obviously sort of a particularly sort of pertinent point for us at the moment, you know, just to get out and experience what nature you can. It does definitely make you feel better. So that was great, because your talk, I shouldn't say this, but by pure chance, it follows on perfectly from where Steve's talk about the Atkinson's remarkable tree survey, where Steve's talk ended, and you'll see if you listen to it, about sort of about the human connection with nature. It followed on perfectly how with your own sort of specific tree friends there, if you like, that you got to know. So
yeah, what I found really interesting there is that I thought when you see something once, I thought I knew everything about the tree the first time, but I kept seeing different things when I came back. And it was just that stopping and spending time.
Yeah. Right, I think the length of the talk is perfect, Sue. So I'm just going to formally sort of thank you for contributing, and hopefully people will have been interacting through the talk in the comments, and do get in touch with us at Eric or Sue at the Tees Valley Wildlife Trust if you want to know more, or want to have a few more questions. We do like interacting with people. So thanks again, Sue, and thanks for contributing to our conference. So I'll see you sometime soon.
Thank you.